The minister smiled at both of us. If anyone here objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. Nobody moved? That's how it's supposed to go. That's how it goes in every wedding I'd ever been to. Then, from the last row, an elderly woman rose to her feet. I remember thinking, before anything else, that I didn't know her. I remember thinking that my hand was still in Daniel's hand and that his hand had gone cold. That's where I need to start. Not at the beginning. Right there at the end of the aisle. 3 seconds before my whole life folded itself into a different shape. I should back up. My name's Claire. I was 31 years old on the day I got married, standing in my grandmother's backyard in Savannah under string lights my cousins had spent 2 days hanging. 200 people. A jazz trio. My father crying before I'd even walked 10 feet, which everyone found charming and I found unbearable because I was trying so hard not to cry myself and ruin the mascara my sister had applied with the concentration of a bomb technician. Daniel stood at the end of the aisle in a navy suit, and when he saw me, he did this thing he always did when he was moved. He pressed his lips together like he was trying to hold something in. I'd fallen in love with that exact expression 4 years earlier in a parking lot outside a hardware store. Of all places, when he dropped a box of nails and apologized to the nails. We'd done everything right. Premarital counseling, a budget spreadsheet, 2 years of Sunday dinners with each other's families, until the families started finishing each other's sentences. His mother, Pat, called me daughter before we were even engaged. My father called Daniel son, so often my actual brother started keeping count. There was only one small, strange thing. About 6 weeks before the wedding, an invitation came back. Not RSVP'd, no. Returned, unopened, forwarded 3 times, the address crossed out and rewritten in different handwriting each time, until it finally found its way back to us with a sticker that said, "Return to sender." It had been addressed, at my mother's insistence, to a name I didn't recognize. Eleanor Whitfield. Who's Eleanor Whitfield? I'd asked her. My mother had gotten very interested in folding a dish towel. An old family friend, she said. I wasn't sure the address was still good. Clearly it wasn't. No, she agreed. Clearly not. I let it go. You let a lot of things go 6 weeks out from a wedding when there are seating charts to finalize and a florist who keeps texting about ranunculus availability. I didn't think about Eleanor Whitfield again until the day itself, when I glanced toward the back row during the processional and saw an unfamiliar woman sitting very straight, very still, a small handbag in her lap, like she was ready to leave at any moment. I remember thinking, that must be one of Pat's church friends. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. The ceremony moved the way ceremonies move. My father handed me off. The officiant, a family friend named Reverend Combs, who'd known Daniel since he was in diapers, made a joke about how long he'd wondered if this day would come, and everyone laughed the easy laugh of people who love you. Daniel's vows made me cry before mine even started. He talked about the nails in the parking lot. He talked about how I'd once driven 40 minutes at midnight to bring him soup when he had the flu, and how he still didn't fully understand why, and how he'd stopped needing to understand it and just decided to be grateful for it every day since. I looked past him once, at his mother in the front row. Pat had her hand pressed flat against her chest, the way she did during anything that moved her. Beside her sat Daniel's father, Robert, who almost never came to family events anymore since the divorce, but who'd shown up today in a gray suit, quiet and careful, like a man walking on a floor he wasn't sure would hold him. And behind them all, in the last row, that woman, Eleanor, if that's who she was, watching not the way a guest watches a wedding, watching the way you watch something you've been waiting a very long time to see. I didn't have time to wonder about it further because Reverend Combs was already smiling at the crowd, already opening his mouth to ask if anyone objected. A question that exists purely as tradition, a rhetorical formality nobody actually expects an answer to. If anyone here objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace. The woman in the last row stood up. Every head turned at once. I heard my own heartbeat before I heard anything else. Pat's hand flew to her mouth. Robert went very, very pale. The particular pale of a man who has just recognized someone he hoped never to see again, or hoped never to see again in this way, at this moment, at his son's wedding. "I'm not here to object," the woman said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. "I need you all to forgive me. I should have done this a long time ago, and I've run out of time to keep waiting for a better moment." Nobody breathed. "My name is Eleanor," she said, "and I think some of you might remember me. Robert certainly does. I want to tell you that Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly, that he leaned over and whispered, 'It's fine. I've got this,' like husbands do in movies. He didn't. He just stood there, jaw tight, staring at his father with an expression I'd never seen on him before. Not anger, exactly. Something more like bracing. 'I don't understand,' Reverend Combs said, which was, I think, exactly what everyone in that yard was thinking. Eleanor's hands were shaking around the little handbag. She opened it and took out something small. A photograph, worn soft at the corners the way photographs get when they've been held too many times by hands that couldn't put them down. 41 years ago, she said, I was your neighbor, Robert's neighbor, back in Marietta. She looked at Robert now, not at the crowd. You remember Marietta. Robert didn't answer. He looked like a man underwater. I was 17, Eleanor said. You were 19, and I got pregnant, and your family moved you away within the month, and mine sent me to my aunt's in Tallahassee before I even started showing. So nobody in town would talk. Her voice cracked on the word talk, like it still cost her something all these decades later. I had a daughter. I named her Margaret, after my mother, and 6 weeks after she was born, my aunt told me a family was ready to adopt her. A good family, a kind family, and that it would be better for everyone if I let her go quietly and never said a word to anyone, including you. The yard had gone so silent, I could hear the trio's cellist accidentally brush a string. I let her go, Eleanor said. I've spent 41 years regretting it, and 41 years telling myself I did the only thing I could do. I looked at Daniel. Daniel wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his mother. Pat had gone the color of the tablecloth behind her. Pat, Eleanor said, and her voice was gentler now, almost apologetic, like she knew what she was about to do to a woman she'd never met. I think you adopted my daughter. I think her name is Patricia now. Patricia Ann, born the same year, same county, closed adoption, everything sealed. I've spent 3 years trying to find her through one of those genealogy sites. I finally did. She looked for the first time directly at Pat. I think you're my daughter. I think I'm your mother. And I think that makes Robert, her voice wavered again, your father, which makes him Daniel's grandfather, not just an old family friend who never quite stayed close. I need to tell you what that yard looked like in the silence after that, because it's the part I remember most clearly, more clearly than my own vows. Nobody screamed, nobody fainted, the way people do in the version of this story you'd expect from daytime television. Pat just sat there, very still, staring at a woman she'd apparently been looking for, or being looked for by, without either of them knowing it, for the whole of both their lives. I have your birth certificate, Eleanor said, quieter now, like the fight had gone out of the moment and only the grief was left. The original one, before the amended one they gave the adoptive family. I have it in my bag. I've had it for 3 years and I haven't known how to knock on a stranger's door and say, I'm sorry, I think I'm your mother and I gave you up and I've regretted it every single day since. Pat stood up. Slowly, Robert reached for her hand and she let him take it, which told me something. That whatever had happened between them, whatever had driven them apart over the years, some old understanding was still there, buried under all that time. You knew, Pat said to Robert. Not a question. I found out 2 years ago, Robert said. His voice barely carried. When she reached out to me first, I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if I had the right to tell you something that wasn't only mine to tell. You've known for 2 years, Pat repeated. And you let me go to your son's rehearsal dinner not knowing my own mother was standing 40 feet away. I was trying to protect you, Robert said. I know that's not enough. I know that's not an excuse. No, Pat said, it isn't. Here's what I remember about the next few minutes, because they didn't happen the way you'd think. Nobody left. That's the part that surprised me. In every version of this story I'd have imagined, someone storms off, someone slams a car door, someone says something cruel enough that it becomes the sentence everyone repeats for the next 20 years. Instead, Pat walked, unsteadily, down the aisle toward the back row, toward Eleanor. Everyone watched her go the way you watch someone walk across ice, uncertain if it will hold. She stopped a few feet from Eleanor. They just looked at each other for a long moment. Two women, 41 years, and one bad decision, and one grieving, guilty silence between them. I always wondered, Pat said finally, why I never looked like either of my parents. I used to make up stories about it as a kid. I told myself I must look like some great aunt nobody talked about. You have my mother's chin, Eleanor said, and her voice broke completely on the word chin, of all words, the smallest, most human detail in the whole enormous revelation. I used to look at you in the one photo I kept and think, she has my mother's chin. I never even got to tell her that. Pat didn't hug her. I want to be honest about that, because I think it matters. She didn't run into Eleanor's arms the way it would happen in a movie. She just reached out slowly and took Eleanor's hand, the way you'd take the hand of someone you weren't sure yet if you could trust, but wanted to try. I'm not angry, Pat said. I don't know what I am yet, but I'm not angry. I would understand if you were, Eleanor said. I know, Pat said. That's not the same as being angry. Daniel finally turned to look at me. 200 people were still sitting in their chairs, nobody quite sure whether a wedding was still happening or whether we'd all wandered into someone else's family's turning point. I didn't know, he said quietly, just to me. Any of this. I want you to know I didn't know. I know you didn't, I said. Do you want to stop? We can stop. We can do this another day, when it's just... He gestured helplessly at the entire scene behind him. Not this. I looked past him at his mother, still holding a stranger's hand who wasn't a stranger at all. At Robert, standing a few feet off, waiting to see if he'd be forgiven, or if forgiveness was even his to ask for any more. At my own mother, 3 rows back, who I suddenly understood had known Eleanor's name for years, had tried to invite her, had perhaps been trying in her own quiet, meddling way to fix something that was never hers to fix. No, I said, I don't want to stop. Reverend Combs, God bless him, cleared his throat. Should we? Finish it, Pat said from the back row, not letting go of Eleanor's hand. Please, finish it. Today shouldn't only be about this. We finished the ceremony. I won't pretend it felt the same as it would have 10 minutes earlier. Some of the lightness was gone, replaced by something heavier and I think more honest. When Reverend Combs finally said we could kiss, Daniel held my face in both hands like he was trying to remember something he was afraid of losing. And I understood, in that moment, that we weren't the same 2 people who'd started walking down that aisle 20 minutes before. Nobody in that yard was. At the reception, Eleanor sat at a table near the back, not the head table, because nobody had decided yet what she was, exactly, in this family. Pat sat with her for most of the night. I saw them at one point, both crying quietly over a piece of wedding cake neither of them was eating. Pat holding the original birth certificate Eleanor had finally handed over, reading it like it might tell her something the last 50 years hadn't. Robert sat alone for a long while before Pat waved him over. I don't know what they said to each other. I only know that by the end of the night, he was still there, and she hadn't asked him to leave, which felt, given everything, like its own kind of miracle. It's been 2 years now. Pat and Eleanor talk most weeks. Not every week. Some weeks are still too complicated for that, still carry too much of what was lost. But most weeks. Pat took her to Marietta last spring, to see the street where it all started, and Eleanor cried the whole drive there and most of the drive back. And Pat says she's never regretted a single one of those tears. Robert and Pat didn't get back together, if that's the ending you're hoping for. Some things don't heal just because the truth finally comes out. But they talk now, differently than before, carefully, like two people rebuilding a bridge from opposite banks, meeting somewhere in the middle a little more each year. My mother finally told me the whole story of the invitation. She'd known Eleanor for years, it turned out. They'd crossed paths through a support group for birth mothers of all things, and Eleanor had confided in her one night about a daughter she'd never stopped looking for. My mother had put two and two together long before the wedding and lost her nerve every time she almost said something, and finally decided the only thing she could do was send an invitation and let the truth find its own way in. "I should have just told you," she said. "I'm sorry I made you carry the not knowing." "You didn't make me carry anything," I told her. "You just believe people deserve to find each other, even if it was messy, even if the timing was terrible." She smiled at that, the small, tired smile of a woman who'd spent a long time hoping she'd made the right call. "Especially if the timing was terrible," she said. "That's usually when it matters most." Daniel and I still have the photograph Eleanor showed us that day. A request from Pat, actually, who framed a copy and gave it to us as a wedding gift the following Christmas. A young woman in 1980s, Marietta, holding a baby for 6 weeks before the world told her she had to let go. We keep it on the bookshelf next to our real wedding photos. Not hidden away, not a secret anymore. Some mornings I look at it and think about how close we all came to never knowing. How Eleanor almost didn't stand up. How my mother almost didn't send that invitation. How easily this whole family could have kept living inside a story that wasn't quite true. Generation after generation. Nobody ever finding out why Pat had a chin that belonged to nobody she knew. I think about what Pat told me once, months later, over coffee. "I spent 50 years feeling like a puzzle piece from the wrong box," she said. "And then one day, at my son's wedding, of all places, someone finally showed me the picture on the puzzle box lid. It didn't fix everything, but at least I finally understood what I was looking at." That's the part I keep coming back to. Not the shock of it. Not even the forgiveness, though there was plenty of that eventually in its slow and imperfect way. Just that. The relief of finally understanding what you were looking at all along.